you think, oh, this problem is unsolvable. And then you switch up who's solving the problem. And then it becomes
So
solvable.
true.
It's not an intelligence thing. It's not it's a chemistry thing.
Totally. Engineers have natural affinity to different types of problems.
Yes. Yes.
And I would say 90% of victory as a manager is finding the right engineer for the right problem.
Gwen, let's start by telling the audience a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Yeah, so first of all, I have a lot of background. I'm fairly old. I have 20-year career behind me. And most of my career has been in data architectures. And I've worked at places like Oracle and Cloudera and Confluent. And those are very different data technologies, but building great data systems, working closely with customers, working closely with code, and really solving this how do we make data efficient puzzle was kind of the ongoing theme. My most recent role, previous to the current one, was at Confluent, where I led the cloud native Kafka team, where I led through we talked about transformations. I led the transformation of Kafka and the team that is writing Kafka toward the cloud. So it was changes in code, but also changes in culture, approach, and so on. So this was very exciting. After a bunch of years doing this, I started my own company with the idea of making it easier to build software as a service, which is like a very general problem. And as a result, we pivoted and iterated on several approaches before we landed on what we're currently doing, which is building serverless Postgres that has a lot of custom features for people building software as a service.
Cool. And we will hopefully get back more into what you're doing at Nile in a little bit. But since this is a podcast about engineering leadership, I'd love for you to tell our audience just a little bit about how did you get into engineering leadership and what was that decision like?
Yeah, I think a lot of engineers end up in engineering leadership slightly by accident. So my story is very similar. So I was at Confluent from very early on, which is great because you kind of get to know everyone and you have all those relationships. And I knew starting at Confluent that my next role will be my own company. So I was very honest with Janea, the Confluent founders, that I want to try different roles. I want to see different parts of the company. I want to gain this very wide experience. So at Confluent, I started with engineering, and then I did product, and then I moved to marketing. And and after about a year in marketing, I was like, okay, I think I learned how to talk about products, but I feel like I'm running out of things to say unless I go back to the ground truth, which for me is very much engineering. So found a manager who could figure out why this girl from marketing is trying to join this engineering team. I think everyone in the the company grew a lot. I think everyone was a bit surprised about the transition, but I joined an engineering team. And maybe 3 months later, there was this big project. Everyone was kind of panicking about an impending guideline. And I very naturally basically got a bunch of people together in a room, like, okay, I'm doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this one. Let's talk together in a few days and see where we are and adjust. And basically, after this worked and we hit the deadline and things were surprised, to everyone's surprise, we were successful, my manager was like, did you think about being a tech lead? I was thinking that I'll assign this, and this person to you, and you can get this new grad and this intern, and let's see how it goes. And I was like, okay, I mean, I can see the gap in the organization. I can do it for a while. I don't see why not. And I was thinking, like, okay, I'll lead this small 4-person group for a bit and then move back to writing code. And, it was 4 people and then it became 8 people. And then it became 15. And then it's like, okay, I need to start training other leaders because this is not scaling. And then, a few years later, I am running an org with managing managers, and none of it was really a career plan, but I enjoyed it. It's very different from engineering in many ways, and I enjoyed engineering, but I really enjoyed the ability to have large leverage on organizations, that it's not just your impact is what you can do, or maybe you and one other person can do, but really you can make a big plan and you have the credibility that you can actually execute it and sell this bigger idea to the organization. Okay, Confluent Engineering is now going to do this thing that everyone thinks is impossible. And we know we have the credibility, the resources, the skills to actually deliver on it. And this
That's
is really
great.
exciting.
Cool. And we will definitely dig into some of the lessons and breaking changes there. Cool. And Gwen, how would you describe your current job? Speaking of breaking changes from your Confluent job.
A jack of all trades, for sure. And that's the biggest thing. You don't get to do anything for very long. And almost by definition, and I'm curious also about your take, but for me, by definition, the role of a founder is to do stuff that you have not exactly hired for yet. So it's always things that nobody else is doing. So right now it's writing documentation, writing tutorials, customer support. We haven't hired that yet. Like just my co-founder spends a bunch of his time doing memes because we haven't hired anyone in marketing yet. So,
Yep,
and
sounds
apparently memes
yeah.
is the
Your
way
two
to go.
jobs together sounds like my my life as a founder. Yeah, I feel like my view on leadership in general is you do the work that nobody else wants to do because it's too boring, and then you do the work that you've hired no one to do because no one can do it, and then the combination of that work is sort of your job as a founder.
Yeah, I told the managers that I trained that you don't become a manager because you want to enjoy your day-to-day work. That's engineering is better at that. You become a manager because you really enjoy the impact and you're willing
Yeah,
to take a lot of crap on the day-to-day in order
yeah,
to have
yeah.
this.
Yeah, that sounds right. All right. Well, let's dive in. So I feel like after I met you, multiple people I met said, "Oh my gosh, Gwen Shapira, when I was at Confluent, she was the best engineering leader, really, really respected, got so much stuff done, just heard nothing but good things." So from everything I heard, you were incredible. And you were there during a time of incredible change. And there's really really a long period of major growth while you were there. And so I'm curious about just things you learned during that time. And so on the topic of change, I'm wondering, we'll start with a feel good story. What was one change that was necessary? Maybe it didn't feel good at the time because it was so necessary to change things, but I'd love to hear about just a smooth introduction of a necessary change, and then we'll we'll dig into some maybe more interesting stories.
So actually my favorite story is a change that my first attempt to do it was an absolute catastrophe. And then the second attempt worked. So,
Perfect. Yeah, even better.
because change is hard. You don't always get it right the first time. So to set the background, we're talking about the team that I led at the time was a Kafka team, and it was originally, remember that Confluent started as an on-prem product company. So those were people who were very used to, we spend 3 months, 6 months building the product, testing it, and then it ships off to customer and we move on to the next release and forget about the old one, more or less.
Terrifying.
I know, right? But people were really used to it. And then when cloud started, the organization was basically set up as almost like an internal customer. So it was a platform engineering organization, but it was like, okay, we will build our release the way we're used to, and we'll give it to this other org. and they will deploy, upgrade, monitor, maintain, all the stuff we're used to our customers doing. In retrospect, this may not have been the best plan possible. And I think even at the time, there was enough knowledge on how to do cloud native organizations that this could have been done better, but it was that was the way it was built, and it allowed us to keep shipping on-prem, which at the time this was the money maker for the company. We couldn't stop doing it, so it made sense. And then when I joined, it was already very obvious that this is not going to work. You cannot hand over a product to another team and tell them you run it and have a great product as a service. So we knew that we need to give the product teams a lot more production ownership. Like this was the entire theme of my first year in the leadership role. And one of the places where it was very frictionful was upgrades. New release, moving from, you hand it over to a platform team and they figure it out, was no longer working. And the nice thing is that the platform team, it was a fantastic team. It probably still is a fantastic team. And they built all those really, really great tools for doing things like deploying and upgrading and spinning up new regions. Like all this had really nice tooling. So they thought quite naturally, we built those really good tools. We're going to hand it over to the product team and have them do it, which made sense. And the team already has on call and they can figure out when to run it, how to run it. And if something goes wrong, they can figure out what to do. That was like the big thing, right? Because coordinating between the teams when stuff went wrong was a bit of a disaster. So it sounded really good. The way we did it the first time around is that, a bunch of managers discussed that it's going to be a good idea. And then the manager of the platform team, currently my co-founder, but basically went to his team who were complaining that they have to do all these operational roles and basically service my team, which was not yet doing it, and told them, oh, okay, we agreed that Gwen's team is going to take over upgrades. Which is fantastic. But then next time my team had a new release, they called the platform team and say, hey, we have a new release. And the platform team said, oh, fantastic, here's the tool, go upgrade. And my team freaked out. And this was like in the middle of someone's on call and he was busy with a bunch of stuff. And I was like, no, I didn't think we were doing it. Like, so my team asked me, Gwen, what do I do? Do I upgrade? I don't know. I didn't hear anything about that because I didn't realize that just because we two manager agreed, it means that the next day my team suddenly owns it. So definitely the big lesson was changes have to be communicated much more clearly to all involved. Between the managers, you don't just say, okay, let's do it. You need a bit more of a plan. Every team need to be appraised of the plan. They need to all kind of to have a transition period. You need to understand that people will have feels about the role suddenly changing. So we went back to the drawing board. And I think at this point I had a bit of a stroke of luck that later I turned into a pattern, which was that the guy who was next on call was just this very active, open-minded guy who just does stuff and doesn't overthink it and isn't too worried about if it will work and what's not. We have to upgrade and there's a new tool. Fantastic. Let me try it.
So the issue was that now because your cloud Kafka, somebody has to upgrade when there's new versions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that fell into just the on-call person on your team?
The upgrade fell on the on-call person on my team. I think this is actually a reasonable decision because if upgrades go smoothly, it's almost zero work.
Yeah.
And if upgrades go not so smoothly, then the on-call person is probably the best positioned to
Yeah.
deal with it.
That makes
So
sense. So they have to manually initiate it, though. It doesn't just wake them up. Um,
yeah, it's manually initiated, and you
okay.
have a lot of controls. You can say, I want this many servers in parallel, I want that big batches. So this was, as I said, like the platform team built a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, every company builds internally, and then you start thinking, why is there not something that is more general? But
And
it's
this is the upgrade for all of the Confluent customers, or just you as the internal customer?
So this was one of the places where we had control. We can say, okay, use those clusters as canaries, wait a bunch of time, maybe even just wait for an engineer to manually initiate the next step. And then we had those groupings like, here's low risk customers. Usually everything is fine with them. You usually do them in one big batch. And then we had sensitive customers. And then there were customers that expected, a phone call from the customer success
Yeah.
person and an
Yeah, I
explanation
see.
of what is the upgrade.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as button click, but I would say that 95% was a click or two.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yes, please continue your story. I just wanted to clarify some things.
We're pretty much at the end. So at this point, I had a person on call who was very keen to just do stuff. And not only did he do the upgrade, he also apparently told everyone else in the team in very exciting tones, oh my God, I did an upgrade myself and it was so easy and I didn't have to call anyone and I didn't have to, wait for them to respond and we didn't have to coordinate it. It was just, I just clicked and suddenly my new version is there and I could see the features and my customers could see the feature and so much excitement. So,
Wow.
and he told everyone. So guess what? The next person going on call was kind of like, okay, do I get to upgrade? I'm like, no, we don't even have a new release yet.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I guess, asking for the right team member to take on a change really is the best
Can I
luck you can ask
recommend a
for.
good resource
Yeah.
for people? So I have this book. I had it since 2017. I don't know if you can see in the video. It's probably upside down or something. It's called Fearless Change. And as you can see, I have bookmarks. It also has a lot of comments on every single page, but it's basically like a cookbook for organizational changes. So it has
Oh,
all
I love
those
it.
patterns that you can try. And it's very comforting for me as an engineer who became leader is that, okay, you can try a team member who is extra excited, but if you don't have him, then you can try bringing in someone external to give a talk. And if this doesn't work, you can try having this group of people who help each other. And this is something I did with another change. I basically started pairing my team with another team on a weekly basis until everyone got comfortable. So it has all those patterns. And we're engineers. We try something, and if it doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board and try something else. So
So yeah, so you would say that in this case, just bringing in the right engineer was the way to make this change go smoothly. Yeah, I feel that's often the solution. A surprising amount of the time, you think, oh, this problem is unsolvable. And then you switch up who's solving the problem. And then it becomes
so true.
solvable. It's not an intelligence thing. It's not it's a chemistry thing.
Totally. Engineers have natural affinity to different types of problems.
Yes.
And I would say 90% of victory as a manager is finding the right engineer for the right problem.
Yeah, when I was a professor, my mentor told me with every student, there's a chemistry with a problem. And I thought at the time that was great advice, but I thought it only applied to academia. And I feel like with every leadership thing, there's a chemistry problem.
Yeah, that very much so.
Cool. So that was a smooth change, although we got a 2-in-1. What is one change that didn't go well even after you tried things, and what are your lessons from that?
I don't think there was ever like a change that was important and we couldn't make work eventually. Like there's always like a key to doing it, and sometimes you have to hire for the right person. Like it doesn't exist in the org, but you hire for them. Or sometimes it's about really getting the cooperation of another team and doing that well.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, if a change really matters and you keep trying to change it until it changes, you don't just stand still.
But you know,
Okay.
there are places where you decide that the change is a bad idea. Or that the org isn't just not ready for it and you need to fix other things before that. I'm thinking like that we wanted to do releases at a certain cadence at some point, and we got to
Releases.
up to some point. Exactly. We got up to some point and then we couldn't get it to go any faster. And we found a lot of issues while trying to go faster. We had problems in production that were preventing us from moving a lot faster. We had problems with the test environment that were preventing us. So it was a good exercise to try to hit this goal and then say, okay, our real goal should be to fix this thing before we try again. Kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool. And during your leadership period at Confluent, what was one thing that didn't change that you were proud of? So what was one constant across your teams?
So I love this question because it's almost the inverse. So every time I interviewed an engineer and they heard how long I've been at Confluent, they're like, oh, wow. So how do you keep the same culture with like you this tremendous growth? The company doubled every single year. How do you preserve your culture? And my answer was that we really didn't.
Love that.
I cannot point at a single thing that stayed the same. Everything changed all the time. And honestly, I think it's a good thing. I don't think I want the same culture for a 10-person company, 100-person company, 1,000-person company. Like it shouldn't be the same culture, right? So it's hard for me to point at something that didn't change because I think literally everything did.
Yeah. So follow-up question, how did the people handle that? Because not everyone deals so well with everything changing every year.
They dealt with it a lot better than I would expect.
Yeah.
And I think a saying that we had at Confluent at the time, and I think is true, is that growth solves a lot of problem. And partially it solves a lot of problem because it gives people great motivation to stick with the hard parts and try to make things work because you know the company is growing, it's successful. People are not going to leave very easily. They may even stay past the point where they should have left, which is a different story. But in general, people were very motivated to deal with it. And they sucked up some of the suck and they were creative about improving things where there were points for improvement. So everyone dealt with it individually, but I think overall most people stayed for many years, which was amazing.
That's amazing. Oh yeah, I also feel like Confluent just had such a great run. Very very unique. Okay. Well, given that everything changed at all times, I'm not sure my next question has that exciting of an answer, but I will take a bet on it. Which is, what's one thing that did change that surprised you? That you thought, oh, everything except for this will change, this will stay the same, and then even that changed at some point.
There were people who joined Confluent at a point in their career that I'm like, okay, they are what they are. They are experienced, they have their habits, they're not going to suddenly become different people. And what I discovered is that when they needed to be different people or to adopt different traits because they realized that this is going to help them make an impact at the level they wanted, they managed to do it.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's incredible, and it was always inspiring. And I had team members who were so deep coders, very detailed. They had trouble communicating because they wanted everything to be very precise, but they wanted to have bigger impact, and they figured out how to communicate with executives, how to paint a very broad and exciting vision. Like, and those are great skills. And I was so excited to see people grow at a point where, like, I don't know if it's possible, and it turned out to be possible.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So as their manager, or as someone in a leadership position in the organization, was there anything you did that helped foster that kind of environment, or was there direct feedback you gave that gave people the ability to see they needed to change?
I don't think I can take a lot of credit for it. I gave some feedback, but as a manager, you give a lot of feedback to everyone. And it's really about, some people can make use of feedback, and it's amazing when it happens. And some people, a lot of times, they choose not to make use of feedback. Like,
Mm-hmm,
I'm
mm-hmm.
at my comfort zone. I don't want to go any further. This
Yep,
is good for
yep.
me. Thank you.
Okay. And I mean, on the one hand, it seems like Confluent just really had a great run during this time and hit upon something amazing from the beginning and wasn't without the pain, but it was really a good environment for all this change. But was there anything you believe helped with the interview process or other parts of the selection process that helped create these groups of people who were so adaptable and embrace this change with open arms?
It's a good question. I don't think it was the interview process at all. The
Yeah.
interview process were, I think it was very like industry standard. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, now that we've talked about breaking changes at Confluent, let's talk about breaking changes across the industry overall. So, Gwen, you have this really famous newsletter, Hacking SaaS. So, for people out there who don't read Hacking SaaS, how many subscribers do you have, Gwen? It's a lot.
yeah, it's over 3,000 now. I'm very
Yeah.
excited about the
Yeah,
number.
yeah, yeah. That's a lot for especially I feel like a decently niche topic and one person writing. Gwen has really, really insightful takes. And something that I've been impressed with is Gwen manages to comment on what's going on in the industry while not really seeming like just kind of hype chasing around, for for lack of better words to describe an alternative approach to this. And so Gwen, I am curious to hear, well, first of all, just how do you keep up with trends in the industry? How much of it is necessary for your job? How much of it is just like, this is, what you live and breathe? And yeah, like how do you do it? How much do you do it?
Yeah. So first of all, keeping up with changes was always kind of a passion of mine. Like, I'm old, so I'll mention Slashdot as my first engineering news site. But I was addicted to Slashdot and then Hacker News, and like, yeah, I enjoy seeing what's new. So for me, it's not a burden. It's like it's the thing I would be doing even if nobody was paying me for it. And a lot of time I did it without it being an explicit part of my job. As in a product role, it's extremely important. So my favorite product mentor, I hope you'll get him on the show at some point. I need to connect you guys. His name is Crix with an X.
Oh, I
So,
know Craig's
you know
Finn.
Crix, of course you do. He knows
Yeah, Craig's
everyone.
is
You
the
know
best.
everyone.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's absolutely my favorite product mentor. So he defined the role as the person who looks around the corners, who
Mm-hmm,
kind of
mm-hmm,
looks a bit ahead, checks what would be surprising, what will disrupt, what's coming next.
mm-hmm.
And when this, I think this is a big part why I love product, because I actually it's part of my job, and I get to look at the industry evolution with a viewpoint, with
Yeah.
some kind of motivation.
Yeah, now that you say it that way, I feel that's how I got into product as well, because I don't think of myself as someone that likes to keep up with news. But for my very specific domain, if there's a product, I know about it. And how I realized this was even when I was in grad school, someone came to my office and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing research on topic X." And I said, "Oh, here's 20 papers. Have you read them?" And he said, "How did you know those papers?" And I said, "Well, I thought about doing research on topic X at one point. You read every single paper. Like, why wouldn't you why wouldn't you do that?" And then once you start following the topic, if there's a new paper, you have to read it. Like, why would you not do that? And I feel like for product, I'm very similar. If I work with a product person and they don't know about some product in their space, I'm like, what? How can you go to sleep at night?
That's exactly it. And now that you say it that way, there is such a natural overlap for research and
Oh
product
yeah.
that I did not expect. Like the product role is very much a research role, although I don't think there's many academics who get into it. But I'm thinking like when I had to come up with a pricing model, I basically signed up for every single related product, probably
Oh yeah,
50 of
absolutely.
them
How
over
are
a
they
week.
advertising? What's their pricing model? You sign up for demo.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a lot
Exactly.
of research. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, this is the secrets of how to keep up is to be obsessive about keeping up.
Yeah, well, because then once you start keeping up, then it doesn't feel right. You can't go on with your day if you didn't check. Is there anything
Yeah,
here? Yeah.
yeah, and especially like again, part of the product role is to present some kind of a cohesive thesis to your team.
Mm-hmm,
I've
mm-hmm.
looked at all those things that change, and this is my thesis around
Yeah, here's my point of view. Yeah, it's actually completely
exactly.
similar to research. You need both the related work, so to speak, and your thesis. And actually there's like very different schools on research. Some people say, blinders on, don't read any related work until you form your thesis. Some it's, read everything, form your thesis. But yeah, I
And
do.
it's
Yeah.
usually an iterative process, right?
Yep.
You read a bunch, you kind of start forming a thesis, and now you need supporting or contradicting evidence for your
Yeah.
thesis. So you start
Yeah,
reading
yeah, yeah.
more with that
Yeah,
point of
yeah, yeah.
view.
You go out for user interviews. I really like polls.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, polls are very tricky. My
yeah.
academic background is in statistics, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
cannot do a poll without overthinking all my
Yeah,
mistakes.
yeah. No, I love polls. I use them. People cringe at how like liberally I use them, but they're not like, you don't use them for a source of truth. You use them to kind of tell you go left or right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a signal.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and
I'm
I really love user interviews. It's also something that I you learn like it's exciting in a way that unexpected things can happen. Like you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
in and you never know what you learn. And
yeah,
I think part of the looking for new things, and I think you share the same trait, you look for the aha moment.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
something that will be like, oh, now stuff makes sense. Or,
yeah.
oh, wow, I haven't thought about it that way, but it changes everything.
Yeah. And you can feel when it has happened and you feel when it hasn't. And, in the meantime, I just always like to keep a very clear, honest view on what is the state of the world and do I actually have a cohesive thesis here.
So something I have to say is that your blog actually was one of my aha moments.
Interesting.
You wrote a blog post about monitoring debt. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about it that way. And it was like, you know how you have like random thoughts and then someone else says one thing and it's like suddenly everything fits together. All those problems, all those ideas. Now I have
Yeah.
this mental framework in place and I know what to do. So you definitely created one of those for
Oh,
me.
thank you. Thank you.
And I think as I'm looking at all the signal and trying to bring stuff to people's attention, things that are trendy but not overhype.
Mm-hmm.
This is one thing that I really look for. Is there something that kind of creates the insight, something that has insight, that has the potential to not just be new framework, new this, new that, but a new way of thinking that people
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
use in many ways.
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to the Ezra Klein podcast recently about how, there's a real hunger for curation because the internet used to be about curation. Now it's about algorithms. And I feel like a lot of the hype, it's like AI this, AI that. But where's the insight? And, I think part of what makes your newsletter appealing and I think also what makes products good, honestly, is there's some insight in there that's being drafted off of.
That's a good point. Good products are curated. It's
Yeah.
not just talk to customers and build
Yeah.
whatever they ask for. It's a creative process at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. I am. Yeah. So I feel like also, you've been on this journey with Nile. You're someone who really does a good job of keeping up with trends in the industry and just like overall hype, but you have this long-term vision that you're balancing with Nile. But at the same time, you're incorporating customer interviews and you're doing that. And I feel like on the one hand, this is the job of a product person to balance input and signal and noise and all that with a vision of where you're going. But I'd love to hear from you. How do you personally sort through all that where you are now? How do you think through, this is where we want to head and this is how I line it up with the 10 user interviews I had last month? Or, AI is really big now. How much do I, angle towards that?
Yeah, and I think this is one place where having a co-founder is very useful because we tend to see things with different level of we need to do it versus it can wait for later, and
Mm-hmm.
but we help balance each other out. I tend to be very hype driven
Yeah.
when I see changes for more fundamental technologies.
Mm-hmm.
I love networking and like things that are kind of almost at the hardware level
Mm-hmm.
and how they affect the stack. And I tend to like be like, oh my god, there is this new type of CPU. Maybe we can do something with that. There is a new network protocol. Maybe we should try
Yeah.
doing something with that. And my co-founder tends to more look at really great developer platforms. Can we leverage them? Can they have impact?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So can we integrate? Can we like broaden the offering? So we tend to kind of balance between those aspects, and this is one way. Like where in the stack does the new thing fit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then like there is stuff that doesn't fit into your vision at all. Like you
Yeah.
look at it and like we have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Some people may pick it up. This is
Yeah.
not about us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there are things that we're like, oh, we can actually contribute.
Yeah.
If so, AI is one of them. This is a trend that after significant debate, we decided that very last moment before shipping our first version of the product, we're going to add vector database capabilities. Part of it is because we heard that advertising vector database capabilities does amazing things to adoption of
Yep.
different databases. So we
Mm-hmm.
want adoption. So this was part of it. But the other part was that my co-founder had the insight that we have something to bring to the table. That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
by having this tenant isolation, it means that if you have multiple customers and they each have their own documents and you need to train on both of them, we actually provide a separation. And this is
Mm-hmm.
something that is valuable and people want. And then we realized, wait, but by providing this separation, it also means that the indexes are smaller. Smaller indexes are much more efficient. So we have values to provide there too. Efficiency is extremely
Mm.
important. So we're like, oh my god, this is not just hype. This is hype that where
Yeah.
we
Hype
are
with an
actually very,
insight.
very relevant.
Yeah.
So we are really looking for those things. And also, I think that we're kind of in almost year 2 into the
Mm-hmm.
generative AI cycle. Year 2 is a good place to say this is more sustainable hype.
Yep.
Stuff
Yep.
can still rise and fall, but after 2 years, it's not flash in the pan.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Great. So, Gwen, while we still have time, I want to touch upon a different kind of breaking change that you have experience with that many organizations are grappling with right now, which is going international. So, at Postman, for instance, we're split across India and the US. And I remember one of the first questions you asked me when I joined was, are you going to run an India team? And you asked with great enthusiasm. In fact, I think you were the only American I knew who said yes. Splitting your time across 13 hours is a great idea. But I mean, I love it. I think the ability to recruit in India is incredible. I really like the India engineers I work with. But you know, I think that you're the most enthusiastic and experienced person at working with India that I've encountered. So I'd love to spend a few minutes just digging into kind of, you know, what was your experience working with India? What advice do you have for people who might be thinking of introducing that breaking change into their orgs? And you know, what are we not thinking about that we
So
should be?
first of all, I think a lot of my enthusiasm is because I started my career as being the Israel team for a US company before I moved to the US.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of empathy for the offshore team. And I think something that both Confluent did and Postman is doing, and I think is the right approach, is to offshore but not outsource. I don't have good experience outsourcing regardless of the location, not in the US, not in any other country, but I have really good experience hiring offshore engineers and seeing them as engineers in the team. The fact that they're in a different time zone is a challenge to work through, but it's not, the mindset is I hired engineers to my team. And seeing them as just like us, they're not absolutely normal engineers, and wanting the same thing, a sense of ownership, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of being
in decisions.
Exactly. So really the model that I like and the one that actually brings sanity back and sleeping hours is to have very independent teams with, they have the product that they own. And this is what when I was in Israel, my team owned an entire product. My manager was in Israel. His manager was even in Israel. I think you had to go 3 levels up the org before you found anyone who was in the US.
Wow.
So this allowed us to very rarely feel the fact that, yes, there are teams in the US and sometimes you have to stay up late, and vice versa, they have to stay up late. But at the end of the day, if you can do 99% of your work with the knowledge and people around and you have a career path, it's not just offshore engineer. I'm junior engineer, senior engineer. I'm growing in my career. I have opportunities. Like if everything, people really look, is it the same? Am I being treated the same? Do I have the same opportunities? Do I have the same, am I evaluated the same, or am I being given all the crappy work? I mean, all engineers are a bit sensitive to, am I being given interesting opportunities? And the same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of just bridging massive cultural difference, you know, do you have advice for people about that? Because I feel like you could start out, you know, Postman's kind of interesting because it started in India and then bridged a massive cultural difference to move to the US already. And so we kind of have evidence of that. I can imagine a team that's just starting to introduce a team in a different country, or, you know, there's lots of, I think we're also still a work in progress too, but you know, I think there's a lot of cultural differences and similarities that I think are interesting in these situations.
I don't know how is it for you, but have you run into shortage of engineers who are extremely familiar with foreign cultures in the US? Because I would say that even if you haven't offshored anything, you will have engineers from a lot of cultures in any team that passes 5 people. I think Nile currently does not have a single American. Oh, no, we have two. But I mean, it's definitely not obvious that people share a culture regardless of location.
Yeah. I think like something that I've been thinking about is just the different work culture of different teams, especially because we were an acquisition into Postman. So we had our culture, then there's Postman culture, then there's, is Postman US, how's that different than Postman India? And so I'm curious if you
Yeah,
have,
no.
if you have advice on breaking changes there and navigating them.
Yeah, no, there's definitely surprises. I think for me, maybe the biggest was that I hired someone in India, great engineer, really lovely background. I was excited for him to join the team. And maybe 2 days before his starting date, I got a message from the recruiters that he joined a different company. And in the US, it's almost unthinkable. Like after you sign, you no longer plan to join a different company.
This explains. I was told someone signed and they said, we really hope they come. And I said, what? They're going to come. But I guess not if they're in India necessarily. Yeah, I think there's just these small work norms. Yeah.
Exactly. And you want to have people with really good relationships that you trust, that understand the other culture, so they can explain, no, this is normal. He's not being bad word about it. This is just
this
acceptable.
is a standard practice. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we are down to our closing questions now. And so are you ready to answer those?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So first question, what are the most underrated breaking changes in the industry right now? Feel free to be as self-serving as possible with this answer.
Okay, I don't know if it's self-serving, but I do think that serverless, even though it had its hype and now it kind of went down, and I feel it's still underrated, that people still don't get how much it can change their life.
Yep. Yeah, I feel that what we're seeing is startups are still adopting, serverless and these like very nicely packaged tech stacks.
It's the packaging and it's the cost. You can suddenly what is the cost of a new region? And what if it's zero? What if you can at zero cost be anywhere in the world? It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm still really excited about serverless too. Okay, cool. And so I have to ask, and you said some of this already online, but what's your hot take on the breaking changes that AI will introduce that people should be most prepared for?
I'm not sure we can prepare for it, but I'm definitely getting used to the fact that not everything I read is written by the human who said they wrote it. At this point, it's still recognizable. I'm still wondering how the world will change. If you review conference submissions, it's becoming a bit of a nuisance, and I hope we figure out a way to deal with the influx of kind of cheap abstracts.
Yeah, I'm hoping this increases the note taking on my team. Although I am one of my team members accidentally shared their screen recently, and I realized they were using GPT-4 to summarize all the meetings, which I was really happy about. I think I could, or they were doing something. They were like writing. They were doing some kind of like nice thing, like documenting APIs or writing meeting notes using GPT-4, and I was really excited.
I haven't tried it for documenting APIs, but this is brilliant. Yeah. Are you coming up with a product for that?
We had a little chat dog when we were at Kita, and it was summarizing APIs using the chat dog, but no one used this feature after the first week of release.
I mean, but the thing that nobody ever reads the docs, but everyone always has questions.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, that's what we thought. You could ask this chat dog anything about, what does this API do? What should I worry about? And the chat dog would tell you things. But I think maybe we needed more users, but we had a very small number of users after the first week. I think the first week a lot of people tried it, and then people stopped talking to the chat dog.
Maybe all the questions were answered. And
the first week, yeah. Yeah, I guess I only checked the first 3 weeks. So maybe after week 4, they came back because their API changed again. Because APIs don't change that much,
Exactly. Yeah. Which is
Yeah,
also a
yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of stats that you usually have about products, but if you're looking at those stats about people trying to understand APIs, like you like the week over week,
Oh yeah, how frequently do they log into your
like
API?
daily active, like API understanding. APIs don't change every day.
Yeah, and we like them that way.
Yeah. They should not change every day. You should get an alert if they change more than once a month. Yeah, I feel like we can count our monthly active user if we don't have to send them the alert or something like that. So, all right, next question is, what change, personal or professional, are you excited about this year that you want to share?
Yeah, so our product was is still early access. This year, we have a very detailed roadmap how to get it to general accessibility and production, like ready for other people's production. And we're going to start charging for it. Like we'll add a paid tier, which means that our company will post its first, something meaningful for the IRS to ponder about in our returns for next year, which we've been zero income, zero revenue for the last 2 years. So we're extremely excited that this year it's going to change.
That's awesome. Yeah, good luck. Sounds like in a really big year. Cool. So that is the end of our interview, Gwen. But I'm sure lots of people are going to want to follow what you have to say, follow your newsletter. So for people who want to learn about you or Nile, where should they find more information?
So both me and Nile are findable on Twitter, also formerly known as Twitter, now X. So this is always a good, like we publish there and I'm way too talkative. So this is not a bad way to find us. And of course we have our company blog at thenile.dev and the community, and we have a Discord and we have a Slack. So you can kind of go to our website and find everything.
Great. And who should use Nile? So I'm sure we have listeners who are wondering this.
Yeah. So right now we're really best fit for very early companies who are B2B SaaS. So their customers are other companies with many users per organization kind of thing. And then it makes a lot of sense.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a fantastic conversation.